There's nothing better than actually going out on your local commercial, like I am today. I'm at a beautiful venue called Packington Somers. It's up by the NEC in Birmingham. And this is what I used to do years and years, go out on my own, practicing the method feeder. And there's nothing better than going out, like I am today, chucking a method feeder to an island, catching crafty F1s in carp. Now, my start of the session, I've started off just with some 2 mils. I'm fishing with a 6 mil Bandam. And as the session's gone on, I've had to change. I've started getting some little knocks. Felt like the fish were in my peg and I couldn't actually catch. Now, one tip is timing your casts. It's absolutely massive. You learn so much. So get yourself a stopwatch, and that tells you, obviously, when you get the bite, and 2, is it actually worth leaving the feeder out there that long? There's one thing for certain today, is most of the bites are coming within a minute of the feeder actually going in. Also, I've started right tight against the island, caught a few fish early, but I've actually come back from the island in slightly deeper water. Sometimes just dropping it a little bit short against the island, so instead of fishing right tight, maybe come back or put 2 winds on your reel and start again. And that's exactly what I've done today. And it's like they're in slightly deeper water and they're more settled. You don't get so much little indications. The actual indications you get are the bites that you need. Now, I've actually gone down to a size, I started on a size 16 kkm with 017, a small band, and obviously putting a Bandam on the hook. And I've actually brought it down now. I've actually brought it down to an 18 kkm, same line, 017, but I'm fishing with single and double maggot. It just seems like they're a little bit crafty. I've changed my mix. I've gone from neat micros to a mix of sort of 70-30 ground bait. And that's the sort of things that you can change, whether you're pleasure fishing or whether you're in a match. And as you can probably tell as well, I'm actually fishing the rod very, very straight to where I'm casting. It's something I learned many, many years ago. One, you can actually get the line down. If you've got a nasty side wind, and I'm trying to fish the lightest feeder that I can. I'm fishing a 20 gram ICS inline method because of the distance, and also with F1s, that I think the lighter feeder that you can use, the less hook pulls you get, which is obviously really, really important, especially if you're a match angler like myself. And you'll probably see, like, my rod is direct. Now, I'm using a feeder arm that actually is called a 360 feeder arm. It actually goes out and it goes round your nets. And it looks like I've got my rod rest attached to my keep net, but I haven't. It's so clever, it actually comes round and it brings, you can actually adjust it to however you want it, but it's out of the way. There's nothing in my way apart from my rod, which is obviously the most important part. Got a nice butt rest. I can actually have all my hands nice and free. I can mess around with my ground bait if I want to make it a little bit wetter, you know, stop it drying out. I can adjust that as I'm going. Hook baits are obviously really important. I've started off with some little 6 mil Bandams, but like I said, at the moment they've got a really, really crafty. There's no point me leaving it out there very long. I'm literally leaving it out there about 2 minutes, something like that. Probably won't get a bite. I'll need the maggots on to get a bite. They come off on the way back, I think. So I'm just using double dead red maggot to an 18 kkm. And I've been loading the feeder slightly different ways. Some casts I'm putting the bait really deep, so I actually fill my mould up right to the top. Literally put a little bit over the top then. So when I'm actually moulding it, the bait is the actual hook bait is right down in the sort of dungeon, if you like, of the feeder. Give it a nice squeeze so that stays on, and then cast, hit the clip, and then follow it. And then just drop the rod in That's the lovely thing about having your rod quite straight. You don't need to strike. When you get a bite, you don't need to strike. The bites are really, really aggressive. You know the actual fish is on. So all you need to do is lift your rod up. So I give it a little tweak of the reel. So the line is actually going to where I cast. That's all you need. You don't need a massive bend in the tip at all. And then just relax. You can get your mould ready for the next cast. Then just sit here, enjoy the fishing, and wait, look for those little knocks. If you get a few little knocks and then nothing, you know there's probably an odd fish around your feeder. They're really crafty. And then you can come back. You might have to double load the feeder. There's certain different things that you can do to try and catch the fish. But the most important thing today is don't leave the feeder in too long. And I said the bite, they're great big F1s. They're really crafty. And you've got to work quite hard sometimes. You haven't just got to sit there. It's definitely not one of those days where you can just sit there. You have to be in and out. There's a little indication then. And you sort of think to yourself, have you? And that's the whole point of this sort of fishing with F1s especially, is they're all around your feeder. They're picking all the ground bait out, all the little pellets. And you've got to try and to fool them to taking your hook bait. I'm not going to leave it there too long. And I think this is a big error that people make sometimes when they're method feeder fishing, especially for F1s. They leave the feeder in too long. It's quite an active way of fishing, and I really enjoy it. It's good if you want to go out and practice your method feeder fishing with your accuracy of your casting. I'm using a lovely 10-foot Superior X rod. So it's perfect for casting, and it's also the great, obviously, action for playing the F1s. Don't mess about with reel lines. 6 to 8 pound. 8 pound is normal. 6 pound for me if I'm fishing at distance. 420 size reel minimum. You don't really want a 320 on. You want a 420. It just gives you that extra power for playing when you're bagging up as well. I said I'm not leaving it there long. I had a couple of tiny little indications. You're trying to build your peg up as well. Trying to get the fish to come to the noise of the feeder going in. And by the end of the session, I'm sure you can actually draw the fish in your peg. And as the feeder goes in, you can just imagine them. They're all round it, following it down. And that's when you get your bites. So I'm just going to load that the same way. Give that a real good squeeze. Don't mix your ground bait wet either. It's quite a dry ground bait on there with just a few micros in it. And later on in the session, if I think there's a few more carp about, you can just go back to putting micros on again, and then maybe putting abandon back on. And I keep my ground bait and my micros separate so I can adjust the mix around the feeder as I want it. So I've got the line down. Don't worry too much about having a little bit of line floating sometimes. If it's not windy, it doesn't make any difference. You'll know when you get the bite. It is nice to get your line down. Little indication again then. They're really, really clever some days. If there's not a lot of fish in your peg, that's why you've got to keep casting, trying to build your peg up. You get like a ball of F1s there and they all start competing. And then all of a sudden they start feeding really, really properly. And that's when you can have your real good spells. Try and cast it very near to it every time if you can. I think that's really important as well. I've just picked a little spot. Like I said, I've started right tight against the island. You can always go back right over. But I've definitely had a little spell short. Caught some big F1s. And there are some absolute massive F1s here in Packington. Oh, there we go. Oh. That was literally like that, and then it just went slack. So that's picked my hook bait up, I've hooked it. I think it's nodded its head, it's dislodged the feeder, and it's gone down the shelf. Didn't take long here, I would say about 45 seconds that was out. Just double loaded the feeder as well. So I compacted the first lot on real hard. And then put another layer on with my hook length in with double red maggot. And it's sort of midday now, and you'll find midday on a lot of fisheries is when you've got to work harder and harder and harder to catch the odd fish. And then as your session goes on, they start really having it. Not one of the bigger ones we've caught today, but they're still nice and they fight like hell. Lovely Packington F1. Little baby hook at 18 kkm. Makes a big difference. Not on every venue, but on some venues you go, bringing your hook length or your hook size down with little baby hook baits like single and double maggot can make a huge difference. And then start putting ground bait around your method. There's one thing for certain, ground bait on its day is unbelievable. I always try and stick a few micros in there just to leave a little bit of food for the fish to try and get them, you know, competing more. And that ground bait leaves the cloud. There's sort of not a lot that, you know, not a lot there for them to eat really. You can just imagine all those millions of particles all flying around. Gets the fish going. I think it actually fires them in, you know, into that sort of feeding frenzy. So in again. Take your time. Just bring that butt of the rod up. See the line sink in there. Got a little bit of side wind which is helping. Let it meet together. Up on your rest. Little butt rest, which is important as well. Just makes everything nice and comfortable. And I can get my mould loaded for the next time. Get my stopwatch going. And I would say the longest cast I'm going to leave it is about 3 minutes. Now if the conditions were really tough and I wasn't getting many bites at all, and then obviously I would leave it there longer. And also when you're fishing for big carp as well, I'm only fishing with a small ICS at the moment. If I was fishing in open water or a lake with big fish in, I would probably step up to a large feeder. Especially when I'm waiting for bites. Sometimes putting a larger feeder on when you're waiting for bites is actually better. Again, you can mould it, you can like mould it differently. You can put your bait right down into the feeder and then like double load it. So you put some bait in first, cram that on the feeder, and then put your hook bait in afterwards with another loose sort of offering. So that all comes off. And then my principle is that feeder goes to the bottom, that all comes off, it creates a cloud, the fish come to it, you've got a feeder on the bottom, and in that frame there's some bait left for the fish to sort of home in on. I've had 2 little indications since I've recast out. So they're just really crafty at the moment. And you'll go through little spells. There we go. Perfect. That was out there for about 45 seconds again. But I did have 2 indications before that. So double loading that feeder definitely seems to be helping. Having a nice softish rod as well is good for the F1 fishing. That Superior X is absolutely ideal for this sort of fishing. That's come off. What an absolute gutter. I think the maggot's gone over the hook. Yep. So I'm hooking one maggot one way and one maggot the other. Again, double load it. Half fill that mould again. So there's plenty of bait going in, even though it's a small feeder. Try and get it roughly where you've been casting. It's a clip. And just take your time. One thing you don't want to do is drag that feeder along the bottom. It needs to be exactly where it's at the bottom to give you the bestest chance of hooking the next fish. Little tweak of the reel, so the tip's got a slight angle in it, and then you're done. And load the mould up for the next cast. 3/4 load that. Get your stopwatch. And this could change any minute. You can go from catching an odd fish to literally casting out and getting one a chuck. It depends on what sort of mood the fish are in. F1s especially are very moody. And like I said, at the moment, just chucking it off the island. Look at that. Absolutely belted round and missed it. How did I miss that? It nearly took the rod round. It might have been a liner. I don't think it was. A little bit of bait left in the feeder, so I'm not really worried about. Just check that hook bait. It's absolutely fine. No, it's not. It's sort of double hook the maggot again. I think they're sort of rolling it in their mouths. Absolutely steam round. That's what's so exciting about feeder fishing. You don't need to strike either. When you're fishing a rod like I am, I've had several people say to me, "Oh, Des, you know, I understand why you fish the rod direct, but I've been snapped up a few times. You don't really need to strike." You know, when you get a bite on the method like that, the fish is on. That's the whole point of the rod. Sort of the real aggressive bites is obviously the fish have picked up your hook bait and they've bolted off. Really, all you need to do is just pick the rod up and play the fish. You don't need to strike. I think some people actually get the bite, they strike so hard that they snap the hook length on the strike. A little tweak like that. I'll just go for that little system again. 3/4 load the mould ready for the next cast. It's great though when you get those real fierce bites. The rod is just like, looks like I've just looked into a speedboat. Oh, little indication then. And on a nice flat calm day like I'm fishing today, if I have my tip literally just touching the water, you can't really do it if it's windy and there's waves, but on a flat calm day like today, if you have your tip like I got it, so it's literally just touching the surface of the water, you see all the little indications. If something comes to the feeder and you get like a little vibration, that shows up massively. So it gives you information that actually there is fish in my peg. They're just really crafty at the moment. And then you can like mess about with different hook baits. You know, do you just put neat ground bait on your feeder? Go back to micro pellets. It's worth trying different things. Just a little tiny indication then. It's amazing information you pick up by having that tip. Like I said, just nipping the water. And that's why you want a rock solid feeder arm. You don't want anything bouncing about. You don't want it on your keep net or anything like that. You want it to put it down as solid as a rock. And if you want to, obviously I've got the butt rest there. I can push that in. If you're worried about, you know, losing your rod, push it down your butt rest. It's entirely up to you. When I'm fishing the method, I'm always alert, watching the tip. Yes. There you go. A lovely little bite then. Another big F1. You just knew that was going to go. And a little, you can see it like little flicking on the tip like that, where probably nailing the ground bait and micros off the feeder. And just take your time with F1s. There's no rushing with F1s, especially when they're big F1s like they are here at Packington. You certainly don't need many fish to catch a big weight. Just keep a nice tension on it. Because like I said, we are fishing with small hooks at the moment. We can always change. When the fishing gets better and better, we can go back to a 16. Nice big F1. Yeah, he's probably 2.5 pound. Average sort of stamp for Packington. Ooh, can't get my hand around him. Look at that. Great big Packington F1. So I said, midday now. Does get a little bit more tricky. This is when you've got to work a little bit harder. double loading that feeder, so compacting it on the feeder and then double loading it over the top, so we've got plenty of bait like that. Little squeeze. Beautiful, just by that cover. I think it's really important today as well, like on this fishery, you've got the areas where obviously the fishery management have cleaned the area out to casting. And I'm just watching that line sink, because if fishing gets, there we go. If the fishing gets going, like I think it's going to, I struck like an absolute lunatic then, which was pointless. But you can see the line sinking and all of a sudden it speeded up. It's only a small F1, eh? Shouldn't have struck like that. There was no need of that, but got a little bit excited, I think. Just got that clutch set. One, obviously, if the fish bolts off, that might be a little carp actually. And if I want to adjust anything when I got the actual feeder in, I can just pull it like that, instead of taking the back wind off. If you take the back wind off, you've got more chance of actually getting a tangle where it spins round too much. And I'll show you now when I get this fin, I'll show you exactly what I mean. So everything's to hand. Got a nice 16-inch landing net head. There is some big fish in there in this venue, but I prefer a 16-inch head. I just think it's bang on for F1s and small carp like I'm catching. And like that, if I needed to adjust something now, I can just adjust it like that. So I get my hammer on that. Look at him. A beautiful little 2-pound carp. Let's get him back. Hooks come off, or the hooks come out in the net. Great fishing. Great practice as well. I've actually just started fishing the little mini bandams in yellow. Just change my hook length over, because I've got my quick change bead on. Like that, little mini bandam. Little bit of colour, little fleck. So let's do that again. So first ground bait round the frame of the feeder, and then plenty of ground bait in with your hook bait in. Which sort of double layers it, little squeeze, then cast into that cover. Yeah, going back to what I was saying about the cover, you've got the area where it's clean, then you've got a little bit of cover to the left and right, and what I found is chuck into that cover is definitely helping. So I'm just watching that line sink now. Don't move the reel if you can help it. That's now in. There we go, straight away. This is going to kick off in a minute. It's brilliant, honestly, I love it. So them little mini bandams, little bit of colour. Lucky I've brought a little container for them today. I'll carry them in all the sizes, all the colours. Yellow I've put on today, and that seems to be a real good colour. So I've gone from bandams to maggot. That's a big F1, that. And I'm back to bandams, but in the mini bandams rather than the 6mm. I've caught a load of fish on those little mini bandams since we brought them out. So bring that back like that. Put your back wind on, and if I wanted to adjust it, I can just do that now. Little bend in the tip. Oh, I've lost me bandam. What a gutter. Oh no, I got him back. That's pretty sad, isn't it? I'll leave me bandam. Well hooked. £3 F1 within seconds of that hitting the bottom on that feeder. Brilliant fishing. Get out and try it. Try and take them little tips that I've give you. One on hook baits, obviously loading the feeder and changing from micros, you know, with some ground bait in as the session gets harder. And don't forget to like and subscribe on the Preston YouTube channel.